Hello, and welcome to Cabinet Conversations. My name is Erica Scott, and I am the Artistic Programming Manager at Ford's Theater. If you are joining us for the first time, this is our live series exploring creativity, history, and leadership. You can learn more and explore our past programs by visiting our website at www.fords.org. This has been another wild month and an unimaginable year. As we're headed toward a holiday season, and like others, we wanted to take a breath and find an opportunity to talk about gratitude and joy. Amidst everything else going on across our nation, people will find ways to pause next week to celebrate their gratitude and to honor beloved traditions in new ways. So, in the spirit of keeping things lighthearted, today we're talking turkey. As is well known, President Abraham Lincoln's 1863 Thanksgiving Proclamation is often credited with being the start of an official holiday. Today, we're talking about how Thanksgiving traditions at the White House, the People's House, have evolved to include an official turkey pardoning. We are bringing you three people to connect those dots. Welly Jackson is a turkey farmer from Clinton, North Carolina. For the past 16 years, he has been a contract grower for Butterball. Last year, he was selected by the National Turkey Federation to grow and present the 2019 presidential pardon turkey. He traveled to Washington along with two turkeys, bread and butter, for the White House ceremony. Welly attended Campbell University and lives with his wife and three children. Lena Mann is a historian with the White House Historical Association. She is interested in many aspects of the White House history, including her latest research on the enslaved individuals that built, lived in, and worked within the White House walls. Previously, she has worked with the National Park Service and the Maryland Historical Society. Janet Scanlon is Senior Marketing Manager at the Willard Intercontinental Hotel. She oversees the marketing and communication initiatives and coordinates public events for the legendary property, including their monthly history happy hour that combines history with hands-on mixology lessons. For the past 5 years, Janet has assisted with the National Turkey Federation on the coordination of the luxury stay for two VITs, that's very important turkeys, which were presented to the White House. And I'm pleased to bring back Dr. Jonathan W. White as moderator for today's Cabinet Conversation. John is an associate professor of American Studies at Christopher Newport University and former president of the Abraham Lincoln Institute. Welcome to each of you. As a reminder to all viewers, we are taking your questions on social media platforms, so please feel free to submit those questions using the chat function so that we may share them with our guests during the program. And now, John, take it away.
Thank you so much, Erica. Wow, if there's one thing I've learned already that I didn't know about, it's about VIT, very important turkey. That's amazing. Well, on October 3rd, 1863, Abraham Lincoln issued his Proclamation of Thanksgiving, setting a national Thanksgiving holiday. Lincoln did so at the urging of American editor and activist Sarah Josepha Hale, whose letters urged the president to dedicate an annual national holiday as a unifying day during the Civil War. We're going to put up on the screen an image of one of the letters that she sent, and this one went to Lincoln in 1863. And in this letter, Hale wrote, "Would it not be fitting and patriotic to appeal to the governors of all the states, inviting and commending these to unite in issuing proclamations for the last Thursday in November as the day of Thanksgiving for the people of each state. Thus, the great Union Festival of America would be established." Now, prior to Lincoln's Thanksgiving Proclamation, nationally recognized holidays were scarce. The only two at the time that were recognized were George Washington's birthday and Independence Day. I'd like to start off with Lena Mann of the White House Historical Association. Lena, can you tell us a little bit about Sarah Josepha Hale and her role in what we now know as the holiday of Thanksgiving?
Yeah, so Sarah Hale, she was the editor of the Godey's Ladies book, which was very popular in the 19th century. And she began a letter writing campaign to establish that last Thursday in November as a national Thanksgiving holiday. And she did so because she had read about the 1621 feast, and she became very intent on turning it into this national holiday. And so in 1846, she begins reaching out. She had previously written some editorials about this, but she starts actually a letter writing campaign to petition various state and federal officials directly. And she actually ended up writing to 5 presidents, including Zachary Taylor, Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, James Buchanan, and then Abraham Lincoln, as you saw from that letter, asking to create this national holiday. Now, at the time, celebrating and giving thanks for the autumn harvest, this is something that was pretty established throughout New England by the mid-19th century, and the governors of each of those states would issue holiday proclamations that sort of varied in date from year to year, and also they varied from state to state. But Mrs. Hale's campaign and writing to President Lincoln helped to encourage him to set the holiday. And so her efforts really brought the cause to a wider audience. And also it makes sense because around the time that she starts this campaign, you get some publication of various texts from the time period, like Puritan leader William Bradford's 1650 manuscript of Plymouth Plantation comes out in 1856. So it really does become more of a national campaign.
Now, there's a very famous story that is said to involve Lincoln and Thanksgiving. It involves Lincoln and a turkey. Can you tell us this story?
Yes. So this is a commonly told, it's all over the place. There's an 1865 dispatch from a White House reporter named Noah Brooks, who was actually pretty close to President Lincoln. And he describes an 1863 incident, so 2 years prior, where Lincoln pardoned a turkey at the request of his son, Tad Lincoln. So the dispatch says a live turkey had been brought home for the Christmas dinner, but Lincoln's son Tad interceded in behalf of its life, and then the plea was admitted and the turkey's life was spared. But although this is an excellent story, it does have a couple sourcing problems. For example, the fact that it was told in 1865 about an 1863 incident, and then also this was about a Christmas turkey, so not quite a Thanksgiving bird.
That's right. You know, I still can't help but just want to hope and believe that the story's true. I've got a couple kids and I read lots of children's books to them. And in this one, the story gets immortalized with Jack the turkey and Tad Lincoln asking Lincoln for his father for the pardon, the presidential pardon. It is a wonderful story. And you're right to point out it's a Christmas bird instead of a Thanksgiving one. But that does lead us to thinking about the most iconic meal that we have at Thanksgiving, and it involves turkey. I think most Americans look forward to celebrating on next Thursday. And so I want to ask Wellie Jackson, you've been a turkey farmer for a long time. Can you tell us about what is the day-to-day life like of a turkey farmer, and how long have you been doing this in North Carolina?
I've been doing it for 16 years now, a little over 16 years. And basically you get up and you're a big babysitter. It's a babysitting service. Basically what it amounts to is you go make sure they're happy, they're well fed, and they've got water, and they're healthy, every day. Turkeys don't know if it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, your birthday, your wife's birthday, your anniversary. They want it every day. So you just, every day is pretty much the same, but your main goal is you get up, you go to the farm, and you look after the animals, and you make sure that they're looked after the best care that they can possibly get, and that they're happy. That is our role.
Now, how did you get selected to provide the turkeys last year? Okay,
how it works is the National Turkey Federation chairman is kind of an honorary 1 year. You get to do it for a year. And it always comes from his home state. Well, Kerry Dowdy was our national chairman, Turkey Federation chairman, and he was the president of Butterball. And he wanted to show that, Butterball is not some big company. It's small. A lot of little blocks make up one big block. So he wanted the farmer to really be, the forefront of this whole process. And I had done a little bit of work for him as the American Humane Association Farmer of the Month, and a couple other promotional ideas for them. And so they, from my understanding, they called and had a meeting and decided they wanted me to do it and called me. And I was at school helping kids on a project. And one of my good friends, she was in the room with us helping with the project. And she said, either someone has died or you've just seen a ghost. She said, all your color has left you. I mean, it was just a phone call you can't ever imagine getting, hey, you get to do this great honor. And it was an honor. It was a lot of fun. And it was just absolutely great.
So how many turkeys do you tend to have on your farm at any given time? And then how do you pick the 2 out of that number that you're going to send to the White House?
Well, I have multiple farms, and we have, each farm has quite a large amount of turkeys on it. But this one we built a special barn just with these turkeys. And so what we did, I have brooder farms too, which are basically nurseries. We get them in a day old and we keep them to 5 weeks old. Then we move them to a finishing farm. Well, I bred the whole flock, and then we moved them, and we just honestly, and I'll tell you about the staying here in a minute. We honestly just picked 20 turkeys. And the funny thing was, all butterball turkeys are presidential turkeys, so it was easy to make a pick. It was not like up and down. They're all great, so it was an easy process. But basically, when we moved them to the finishing farm, we just picked 20 turkeys and put them in this special building, and then we just started hand rearing them. Honestly, they all started with their auditioning process.
Okay, and what does that audition look like?
Well, I was in there every day. We had the special building built, and I was with them every day. And you just, every animal has different characteristics, and some of them are a little bit more, how do I say, proud than others. They would strut, and they were pretty in their personalities. The funny story, Butter, we would turn him out and just let him get used to walking on the grass, and he would always take off running. So he was not the one I really wanted to carry, but he was by far one that just did the most strutting and everything else. So he was one of the 2 that got picked. So
you want a proud turkey, not one that's going to look grateful at Thanksgiving for the party.
No, you want one to stray stuff, a beautiful turkey. Everybody wants to see how pretty a turkey can be.
Wow, that's great. Now you send the turkeys to Washington, D.C., and they go to the Willard Hotel. Janet, can you tell us a little bit about the Willard's connection to this wonderful tradition?
Sure. So we have been working with the National Turkey Federation on this tradition for a little over a decade. It's one that our entire staff really look forward to. I personally really look forward to it. It kind of signals the kickoff of the holiday season. But I feel like the Willard is sort of befitting of this tradition because we do have that Lincoln connection. Lincoln stayed with us for 10 days before his own inauguration. That wasn't his first time. He was a frequent guest of the Willard when he was a congressman, but it's nice to kind of have that connection to Lincoln. But we're very excited that the tradition continues. They will be arriving on Sunday of this year, which is we're thrilled. So we'll be preparing the red carpet for their arrival, and we look forward to their 2-day luxury stay at our property.
Now, walk us through the process of when the turkeys arrive. What is their experience? What are they seeing and experiencing? And then tell us a little bit about the room where they get to stay.
Sure. And Wally, please, because, you've had a hand just as much as I have. But so once the White House gives the green light that the presentation of the turkeys, I know they've moved away from the pardoning language over the years, but the presentation of the turkeys to the turkeys is confirmed. The National Turkey Federation lets the Willard know, and then we kind of kick ourselves into gear. So just working with the Federation, they usually arrive a few days before the turkeys arrive to sort of turkey-proof their guest room. They do a wonderful, wonderful job making sure that the room, stays in the same condition as they arrive. I would say they're very clean guests. So, but normally what happens is, a big plastic tarp is put down. The tarp kind of goes up the sides of the wall a bit. I would say maybe the height of the turkeys. And then some wood chippings are put down to kind of make the turkeys nice and comfortable. And then, of course, the staff at the Federation and Welly and his team, or whoever the farmer is that year, will make sure that they have their food and their water. And then, of course, there is a presidential seal that does go outside their door It's sort of in part to show that these are very important turkeys, but also to kind of protect their privacy, as throughout their visit, they often have one-on-ones with media, and we do want to make sure that they remain as secure as possible. So it does kind of help, cover the room that they're specifically in. But normally that's sort of the process. The day they arrive is usually on the Sunday before the presentation on Tuesday. So we normally have a red carpet welcome. Last year we had it where it was in the lobby. So they were taken out of their crates once they got here, and they were able to walk the red carpet. Our general manager, ceremoniously gave them their room keys. A lot of guests who probably were very surprised to be seeing turkeys in the lobby stopped and take pictures. But over the years, I would say more and more people now call us in advance to ask when the turkeys are arriving, because they want to be outside the hotel when they arrive. They're sort of like rock stars in a way. I think everybody just loves their tradition. So I'm anticipating that's probably going to be the same this year. We have modified their experience just a bit. Last year, we did have a meet and greet in the lobby later in their stay. So guests or locals, a lot of people who work in the area came by and got to see them. But this year, it will primarily, you'll only be able to see them when they arrive. And then they'll go and they'll live the laps of luxury in their Willard guest room until they get to meet the president.
Now, we have an image of the turkeys that we can pull up so that viewers at home can get a sense of what this looks like. So can either of you tell us what we're looking at in these two images?
Okay, that is the actual barn that they were raised in. That is at my farm. You can see the North Carolina flag in the background, but that is their actual presidential palace there. And the other picture is the final 12 turkeys that we selected that made the cut there to the end. And 2 of them actually went to the governor of North Carolina, and the other 10, 2, 4, 8. The other 8 went to just various agritourism farms around the state.
Now, the 2 that went to the governor, were they pardoned as well, or did they become Thanksgiving dinner?
They were pardoned too. They went to a farm in Fuquay Varina, North Carolina.
Okay, that's a relief. I was a little
worried.
Agritourism,
and I meant it's an agritourism farm. You can go visit those turkeys today.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Janet, do the turkeys stay in the same room year after year, or do they go wherever is available?
No, they don't typically stay in the same room, but the same sort of room category. So we typically put them in a 2-bedded room because turkeys don't like to share beds, right? But no, they're in a room that's a little bit larger. We crack the window because they like to be at a certain temperature, which I'm sure Welly could tell everybody about. But usually it's just based on availability. But we've been doing this now for over a decade. We try to just keep it all within the same sort of room category, just because it makes it easier for us. It makes it easier for the Federation and the farmer. The room always connects to another room, so it connects to the farmer's room, so it has easy access to him. But yeah, normally it's similar, very similar.
Well, I was going to ask if you ever get calls at the front desk about what's the gobble gobble I hear in the room next to me. But I guess if Welly's in the room next door, he knows what's going on over there.
It's funny because you don't normally get that call. It's usually because we have the window open. Just over the course of their stay, some of the wood chips come into the hallway. So when you're if you're on that floor, you'll wonder, why is that? I mean, everybody does their best to, control that. But ever since we started putting the seal on the door, the Federation had the wonderful idea to do that. It sort of helped explain that. But I will always remember last year, this family was staying on that floor and they had 2 young kids, and it was like Christmas Day for them. They were so excited because it was just so unexpected. So usually
If
Usually
I ever
it's-
stay at the Willard, I'll have to ask for a room where the turkeys stayed one of the years. We got a question from a viewer. And again, as a reminder to those of you who are watching online, you can post questions where you're watching on social media, and they will get sent over to us here so that we can answer them for you. So this question says, how old are the turkeys that are presented each year?
Ours were around 20 weeks old last year. I don't know what they'll be this year. You know, I don't know if they have different standards or anything, but ours were around 20 weeks old.
20 weeks.
Yeah.
So is that young for?
No, that's about maturity.
It is. No,
Yeah.
Shows what I know about turkeys.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've learned a lot over the years about turkeys. I never realized how warm their necks were, or how big their feathers could get. So I definitely would say this tradition has been very educational for many of our staff.
I would guess so. So I have a question for Lena. So we heard the story about Lincoln and the turkey Jack, which of course, again, is a Christmas turkey, but it's sort of part of the story of Thanksgiving. Can you tell us where this modern tradition of presidents pardoning and then I guess presenting turkeys, how that's come about and evolved over the years?
Yeah, so it's been a pretty wild journey. But it really starts out of there's this man named Horace Bose in the 1870s that starts sending turkeys directly to the White House and presenting the president with a fully dressed bird in the mail. And that became really popular, and it was written about a lot. And then after he died in 1913, a bunch of other people started doing this thing where they would send turkeys to the White House directly. So that happened pretty often, pretty much every year, and it got pretty interesting. Some people were sending birds with dressed up as a flying ace, with the aviation goggles. So a lot of fun stories like that. And then in 1947, it really picks up because there was this really dramatic event that occurred that in 1947, there had been this push to have poultry-less Thursdays throughout the United States. It was a government initiative meant to help to reduce, there was a lot of, food shortages following World War II, and this was one of the efforts. But in the lead up to Thanksgiving, it became a national outcry, and tons of farmers were upset, homemakers, and you have the big 3 turkey holidays were coming up, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. And so people started sending a bunch of, it was called Hens for Harry, and poultry farmers would send a bunch of poultry directly to the White House, and it became a spectacle. And so at that point, the National Egg Board and also the National Turkey Federation, they decided to put together a presentation of a turkey to the president. And that started a long line of turkey presentations. And then over the years, it gelled into this tradition by 1989, and it has been annual ever since.
That's fascinating. Do you have any idea when all of these hens and chickens and turkeys were being sent in, what they did with them at the White House?
Well, we do know that a lot of them may have become actual dinner. We know that President Eisenhower, he ate some of his turkeys. I believe that Truman did as well. But it's a little bit more sporadic. It's not like they specifically mentioned each year what was happening with the turkeys. But I do think it's pretty funny that not just turkeys were sent to the White House. One time in 1926, a woman offered a raccoon actually to President Coolidge for his Thanksgiving table. And the family, they appreciated the gift, but they actually fell in love with the raccoon, and they actually decided to keep it as a White House pet and named it Rebecca instead. So that raccoon did not end up on their dinner table.
That's fascinating. There really is a long and wonderful history of people sending gifts to the president. And I mean, very famously, Thomas Jefferson received a cheese that I think weighed 1,400 or 1,600 pounds. Andrew Jackson got one. The King of Siam offered an elephant to Lincoln, and Lincoln wrote back and said, well, the Civil War is keeping me busy right now. I don't think I could use an elephant. But I had no idea about all of those chickens, hens, turkeys, and even a raccoon. That's incredible.
Yes.
Now, we got a question from a viewer about this tradition of connecting it to the Willard Hotel. Janet, do we know when the turkeys started staying at the Willard?
Based on our records, it looks like it was about 13 years ago. But it could have been longer, but those that work at the Turkey Federation and us, we just kind of go off of the 13-year mark based on our own records. But who knows? I feel like as more and more things become digitized, we might learn it might even date longer.
Right. So another question from a viewer, and this is something I've been wanting to know: what happens to the turkeys after the pardon or after the presentation?
So
Bread and Butter went to Virginia Tech, and they're still there, and they're doing great. This year, I don't know. Maybe Janet can tell you where they're going this year. I don't know where they're going this year.
So this year they are. It looks like Virginia Tech, is sold out. They're at capacity down there, so they're actually coming from Iowa, and they are going to the agricultural program at Iowa State. So it'll be Midwest birds this year.
Now, what do they do at these universities?
To my understanding, they join the agricultural program and just join, the educational programs and learning more about, turkeys and poultry, and that's sort of my understanding. I could be wrong. Welly might know more. But
at Virginia Tech, the vet school looks after them, so they're pampered there just like they were at the Willard. I mean, they're pampered every day. I get videos and people send me pictures of them, and they're there. They're getting pampered. People come visit them still all around the neighborhood in the area, and but the vet school looks after them.
Now, Lena, can you give us a historical sense of what's happened with some previous turkeys?
Sure. So they've gone to a variety of locations. Some people have sent them to various petting zoos or farms. From 2005 to 2009, the turkeys were actually sent to Disneyland, and they actually got to serve as marshals in the Thanksgiving Day Parade, which I think is pretty fun. And then a couple years, 2010 and 2012, the Obamas sent some of the turkeys to live at Mount Vernon, the home of George Washington.
Wow. Well, that's fitting, I guess, because George Washington had done some Thanksgiving proclamations in his day.
Yes. He issued a 1789 proclamation. He was the first president to do so, but that one was in December, I believe, and it was a little bit different. It was more of a commemoration sort of Thanksgiving Day.
Well, that actually leads to a question that I have that I think you could take. Can you tell us about why we celebrate Thanksgiving when we do, and how the dates moved around a little bit?
Yes, so the dates did move around a little bit. So when President Lincoln, he makes his Thanksgiving proclamation, he sets Thanksgiving as the last week the last Thursday in November. But then President Franklin Roosevelt, he actually changed it in 1941, designated as a federal holiday, and he made it take place on the fourth Thursday of November. And this was actually done as to help boost the Christmas shopping season by giving it an extra week. So it's all about getting your Christmas shopping done.
But Americans didn't take to that too much, I guess, with the change.
Yeah, so the change, I mean, by now we know it as this fourth Thursday. So eventually it did come around, but I think it did cause some problems in the beginning.
Now, we got a question from a viewer, and I think this will probably go to Welly. And the question is, how do the turkeys get their amazing names? And I'll also point out for viewers watching at home that you can read the biography of the turkeys at www.whitehouse.gov/gobble. But Welly, how do you come up with the names? Who comes up with them?
Our turkeys, how ours went through was my kids my kids' school is a private school, and it's very agricultural. We're very agricultural based in my area, and most of the kids there that go to school and a lot of the benefactors there do with agriculture. So I wanted our school to be involved with it as much as possible. So the lower school there basically submitted names to the White House, and then the president picks the turkeys' names actually from the list that was sent to it.
No kidding.
Yeah, and then they're normally unveiled at the press conference that is held the Monday before the presentation at the White House. So they get their rock star treatment there, where they get a big photo op and their names are unveiled and they get to walk around and get their picture taken. It's kind of a fun little event.
So Janet, when the turkeys show up at the Willard, do you know the names yet, or is that still even a secret from you?
No, I don't know the names until that press conference. No one ever lets it slip.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So most of the turkeys at your farm, though, they just never get a name, I guess.
No, I don't. No.
That's tragic.
4 of them last year got names. So that's.
But Welly, isn't it that some of those turkeys are raised around certain music? I know over the years we've had different music playing in the rooms or TV because they're sort of raised around that kind of stuff.
Yes, mine try to get them acclimated to people and noise. Turkeys are not used to noise, and it like you said, it was like a rock star when they show up there. I've never seen that many people around turkeys before, and then you couldn't even hardly walk in your lobby. It was just a wild experience. But I like classical rock music, so I had a radio in the turkey house, and it played classical rock music 24 hours, 7 days a week. That's what they listened to, and that was part of their getting used to noises and all that. But they seemed to enjoy the rock music, and we did several other things with them, try to get acclimated. I would get them out and walk them around, just get them used to walking with people and not seeing other people. And then my kids would come and we just walk them around. It was like I was exercising. I always said that people would think I was crazy if they rode down there when I didn't see them, because I would read books to them. I would, just talk, and I'm not a good singer at all. I actually try to sing a little bit just to get them used to bad noises, good noises, crazy noises, and such as that. And then, like I said, you'd come to the farm, and there would be me walking with 12 turkeys just out there roaming around, trying to keep them hurled up, just get them used to people and different things that a turkey's not used to.
Wow. Well, I think that preparation definitely helps, especially for the press conference, because, a lot of the media are right there in their face getting the photos, and even in the room. So over the years, it's always surprised me at how incredibly well-mannered and well-behaved they have been. So,
Janet, can you tell us about that press conference, what it looks like?
Sure. So that press conference is run by the National Turkey Federation. It's typically a media only event. The turkey farmer and his family join. Last year, Virginia Tech sent some of their staff up. The Hokie Bird came, so that was always kind of a fun photo to get the Hokie Bird mascot with the turkeys, because you could tell the turkeys were like, what is this? But it's just a fun, short, sort of 30-minute type event where, the turkey farmer gets to talk a little bit about what it was like raising them, similar to what we're doing now. They get to unveil their names, and then just get the limelight, which is exciting. And then, they go back to their room, and I think, like most guests, they kind of unwind and wait for their big reveal at the White House.
Do you have Janet, any memorable or any memories of particular turkeys, things that happened when they were at the Willard?
I think bread and butter, I was really surprised at just their wingspans, like how big they can puff up, because we've seen it like last year when the birds weren't fluffed up, they were very skinny. So for me, it was kind of interesting to see that size difference. But no, it normally just has to do with little children who are always, excited to see the birds. Last year, it was our first time doing the meet and the greet in the lobby. It was very informal. We didn't publicize it by any means. I did send some notices out to some of our organizations that we work closely with, including Ford Theater, and they came by. So it was kind of interesting to see a lot of our office mates coming down and getting the photos. I would say it was probably more adults getting their photos than children. But I just think it's a really fun, unique tradition. Our whole staff love it. I would say with Welly, the time that they were there, the lobby was packed. You would have thought it was a celebrity of some sort coming. So this year we will definitely have a few more protocols in place to kind of, tame the crowd a bit. But that was just such a rock star welcome. That's
great.
Was fun.
Now, Welly, this question is for you from a viewer. The question says the U.S. is the world's largest turkey producer and the largest exporter of turkey products. Is this a family affair for you? How did you begin in the business?
My father did not farm. My grandfather's farm, so it kind of skipped a generation. But It's a funny story how I got into turkey business. We have a place at the beach, and we were at the beach on a Sunday on a sandbar, just carrying on. And one of my good friends was the comptroller of Carol's Foods, John Lee. And we were sitting there, and John said, "Would you be interested in getting into the turkey business?" I was like, "I don't know much about the turkey business." I said, "Well, we need someone, and we want to build a hub and have the finishing farms and one person to look after it. We want a young person, not somebody just to hire it done. We want somebody there day to day, involved in the operation." And I was like, "Well, I don't know." She said, "Well, be at my office at 8 o'clock Monday morning." About 10 o'clock, I was in the turkey business.
Wow. And no looking back.
No looking back. It's been great. Butterball at Carol's Foods was who I started with. And they pretty much, I'm not going to get into all the corporate, how it changed, but they evolved into Butterball. And between Carol's and Butterball, these are excellent, excellent people to work for. Great people. Very, very privileged to get to grow a Butterball turkey every year.
Wow, that's great. Now, we've talked a lot about turkey, a lot about Thanksgiving, and one role that the president has in Thanksgiving. Lena, can you tell us what Thanksgiving often has looked like for presidents who are at the White House? And, well, I'll leave it there for now. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it actually, despite all of the, hullabaloo around the turkeys and the turkey pardon and presentation, it's actually a pretty quiet holiday at the White House. It's one of the more subdued ones. And usually the president will celebrate privately with family, and they may stay at the White House, or they might travel to another location. So that's definitely one of the quieter holidays. And then I think they have to prep up for Christmas, which of course is just a huge event at the White House.
Right. Do you have a sense of the non-turkey foods that different presidents have enjoyed, or have there been times where turkeys haven't been as present in a Thanksgiving meal?
So I think that, if you look at some of the earlier examples, it may not have been turkey. It seems that whenever I'm looking at stuff from the 19th century, it usually talks about turkey in the context of Christmas rather than Thanksgiving. So I think that there has been a bit of a shift over time to consuming turkey, but, side dishes are also very popular. Presidents always have their, mashed potatoes, their peas, the different sides, the cranberry sauce, all of that. So it really does vary a bit.
Yeah. Another question that's come in from a viewer asks this: are there any crazy or legendary turkey stories of presidents or pardons in the past?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a couple stories come to mind. The first president following the Lincoln story to pardon a turkey was President John F. Kennedy. And he pardoned a turkey just days before he was assassinated in 1963. And for that event, he didn't say the words pardon, but he did say, "Let's keep him going" about that turkey. And then the newspaper report did use the words reprieve and pardon. So that's kind of the basic origin. And then the first president that really addressed it is President George H.W. Bush, and he's the one that really turned it into the annual presentation that we know today. And he said of the turkey, he said, "Let me assure you that this fine Tom turkey, he will not end up on anyone's dinner table. Not this guy. He's granted a presidential pardon as of right now." So that's another great one.
I never thought about this. I spent a lot of time doing research in the National Archives. I've held in my hands dozens and dozens and dozens of pardons that Lincoln wrote out for soldiers or criminals in Washington, D.C., or convicts of federal crimes. I've never thought to look for one of the pardons of one of the turkeys, but I presume that those have to wind up in the National Archives at some point as government records.
Yeah, so if you, one of the great sites that I use a lot is the American Presidency Project, where it will compile basically all of modern presidential speeches. So I've gone back, actually today when I was doing research for this, I went back to go review some of the previous speeches that presidents have given at pardons.
That's great. This is a question that's come in from a viewer that, Janet, you touched on a little bit earlier, but if either you or Lena can speak to this, can you talk about the deep historical roots of the Willard, and also then, again, its connection to Lincoln?
Sure. And Lena, feel free. You are the historian. Feel free to jump in. So the Willard is most known for Lincoln's stay with us before his own inauguration. So he was, with us for 10 days before that very eventful day. He arrived to our hotel a bit undercover, if you will, in disguise kind of thing, on February 23rd. And then throughout those 10 days, he was meeting with different cabinet members. I believe he met with candidates that he ran against in the presidential election. He also met with delegates that were there representing their states at the peace conference, because the peace conference did take place at the Willard as well. So I would say the most asked question that I get from people who want to know about Abraham Lincoln is, where was his room? So all records indicate that he was in parlor number 6 on the 2nd floor. Unfortunately, that structure from then is no longer. Our current structure that you see today is from 1901. So I do kind of have to remind individuals that it's there in spirit, but it's not there in physical form. But if you do look at photos from that back then, it would have been pretty easy to kind of identify where his room was. It was on the corner of Pennsylvania and 14th Street on the 2nd floor, above our entrance, which looked like it had a little bit of a balcony, which makes sense because he did end up coming back to the Willard a few different times as president. One of them was to review, I believe, generals. Lena, correct me on that. And I guess he watched that from the balcony. So that sort of helps us kind of figure out that was probably where his room was located.
Do you know how many stories tall is the Willard, the current building?
So we have 12, there's 11 floors, but you could say 12 if you're considering the lower level, which has a variety of function spaces.
Do you know offhand how tall it was when Lincoln stayed?
I believe it was 6 stories. Okay. 5 or 6 stories. You can definitely tell in all the photos if you Google Willard Hotel 1860, 1861.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful diary that was written during the Civil War by a guy from New York named George Templeton Strong. And when I was in graduate school at the University of Maryland, I got to stay, or I didn't stay at the Willard, but I was invited to a talk by a historian named Ron White, and he read this quote from Strong's diary, which is just wonderful. Strong wrote this in July of 1861. He said, "Home again, thank heaven, for of all the detestable places, Washington is the first. In July and with Congress sitting, crowd, heat, bad quarters, bad fare, bad smells, mosquitoes, and a plague of flies transcending everything within my experience. They blackened the tablecloths and absolutely flew into one's mouth at dinner. Beelzebub surely reigns here, and Willard's Hotel is his temple." And I remember hearing that at a talk at Willard's and thinking, wow, Willard's is such an incredible hotel. And that was his experience in 1861. But I think Lincoln had a good stay there, and I know guests today do. But that quote has stayed with me ever since then. Lena, did you want to say something?
She did a great job of covering Lincoln. And I'll also note that the Willard is a place that multiple presidents have stayed prior to their inauguration. So it is a very important hotel in Washington, D.C. history and White House history.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of credit is due to Captain Taylor for identifying that part of Washington to build a 2-story row house, because that is how the hotel started in 1818, because without it, we wouldn't be one of 4 hotels on the inaugural parade route today. Right. So I definitely credit, him, and realizing the proximity to the White House and the Capitol would have been ideal. So
yeah, whenever I bring groups of students to Washington, D.C., we walk down Pennsylvania Avenue, I always point out the hotel, and they're always so taken in by the stories of what has happened there. We've got we have a few more minutes, and we are still getting questions in. This one is for Welly. Can you talk about the difference between a tom turkey and a hen turkey?
Well, a tom is a boy turkey, and he'll get up to 40-some pounds, and a hen is a girl, and they're typically 20-some pounds. And typically what you see parting at the White House is a tom, because they're, in the animal kingdom, usually the boys have to try to attract the girls. So they're the more bigger and more, more flamboyant of the species. So the tom turkey is what you typically see on parade, because they're the most flamboyant of the two.
Here's another question for you from a viewer. And now we've talked a lot about the turkey's experience at the Willard. and at the White House. And this viewer wants to know of you, Welly, can you talk about your turkey pardoning stay in D.C.? Was there a specific part of the experience that you enjoyed most, or something you did in D.C. that was particularly fun?
Well, now staying at the Willard is an experience all on its own, and especially when you're involved with something like the turkey pardoning. I mean, they treated us like we were rock stars too, so that was an unusual experience for us. I mean, it was just absolutely awesome to get to stay in a hotel with that much history. And then probably one of the coolest things was like our representative David Rouser. He arranged for us to take a backstage, maybe back behind the scenes tour of the Capitol. We got to go down into tunnels and see stuff like that and how the actual working of the legislative works. And then getting into the White House, that's an experience all on its own. The amount of security and that you have to go through, and then you get to come in the back, the back way. That's just unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. That's probably my most experience, just getting to see what other people didn't get to see or normal tourists don't get to see. That was my 15 minutes of fame, and we enjoyed every bit of it.
So
did you get to meet the president as part of the experience then?
Yes, I got to meet him in the Oval Office and actually spent a few minutes socializing with him in the Oval Office and had a few pictures made. And he actually signed an excuse note for my kids. My kids had to miss school to go up there, and he signed an excuse note for them to. The reason they were out of school is because they met the President of the United States. And he signed
I hope you didn't turn that into the school, but you kept it as a keepsake.
But we made a copy of it and carried the copy to the school, and they've got it on the wall up there. And then the original copy is in a safe at home. Yep, it's awesome.
Wow.
So, Welly, can I ask you, because I've always been curious. So once they leave the Willard and they arrive at the White House, what is the atmosphere like before you go into the Rose Garden? Are you kind of suffering a bit from anxiety of, oh gosh, I hope whichever bird is chosen doesn't completely have a moment at the presentation? Or
believe it.
Yeah.
That's as nervous as I've ever been in my life. I can promise you that. Because I had nightmares about being on late night TV as a joke, the turkey beat the farmer about the death or something like that.
Yes.
So, yes,
Yeah.
I mean, you're trying to take in all the greatness of the White House, but then in a few minutes, I've got to present this turkey to the world. And is he going to behave? Please behave like you've done it all at home, buddy. You've been such a good bird. Please don't screw up now,
Wow.
That's
How
funny.
long does the entire ceremony take?
The ceremony is pretty quick. I would say only probably 20, 25 minutes maybe, but we were there for a few hours. Like I said, we get to meet the president in the Oval Office and get to chat with him and carry on and kind of see the back room of the White House, so, and then we're there earlier than anybody else, making sure the turkey gets acclimated to its surroundings.
Wow.
How do you choose which one eventually gets pardoned?
The two I carried on the two,
No, like at the White House, is it sort of a game day decision because you
It's a
both
vote.
bring them there? Oh, it's a vote.
So we know which one's which, and then there's after they get their names, we know which one is which, and then the people get to vote on it to the White House. I think Lena can tell you they have their website and they get to vote on which turkey they want pardoned.
It's a vote that they have up on their website, and then they will close it down a bit before Thanksgiving. But yeah.
But they both get the luxury treatment afterwards anyway. They both get to Virginia Tech or Iowa State. It was.
Yes.
We got a question for you, Janet, and it has to do with President Grant greeting people in the lobby of the Willard, and the term lobbyist. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yes. That's another commonly asked question that I receive, and I always have to correct people. So most people...
We lost. Oh, there we go.
The Willard, I would say it was popularized. I think, like a lot of things in the English vernacular, it was coined in the House of Commons. But because Grant was a frequent guest at the hotel, both before he was president, as well as when he was president, he'd sit in the lobby and he would have a glass of brandy and a cigar. And over time, people kind of discovered that he liked to hang out there. And so they would come and they'd self-promote to him, and he called them damn lobbyists. Whenever I kind of think of that story, it amazes me that a president would sit in some place so public. But to this day, we are always asked, where did he sit? Again, very much like Lincoln's room, that lobby doesn't quite exist the way it did, but it's still a really fun story to be a part of.
That's great. Last question is for Lena. Can you tell us people watching at home, can we vote for the turkey in 2020? And if so, how do we do that?
So I'm pretty sure that it's already closed. I might be wrong about that, but I think I checked it earlier today, and I believe that voting is closed, but maybe next year.
So how would we do that next year if we wanted to?
I believe it's up on the just like the White House's website, if I'm not mistaken.
Great.
So
So,
I-
everyone at
yeah.
home, be sure to vote.
Janet?
Yeah, I think just with everything 2020, I think that it might. We haven't really received any information regarding it, but it normally goes up a few days before the presentation. So maybe it'll be up this weekend,
Yeah,
possibly when they arrive.
I looked around earlier, and I don't think it was active, but I might have been on the wrong.
They usually vote once the name's announced at the ceremony. Then the names are announced. Then they open the voting, and then you have a couple of days to vote. Or before the, it's a quick vote. You have only a few days to vote for the turkey. The name.
Because normally when they arrive on Sunday and once they're all settled, the White House's digital media team typically come over and they grab a bunch of content, and I'm assuming a lot of that content has to do with the voting. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, thank you all. I think Erica is going to come back in. Here we go.
Hey, thank you guys so much. Thank you, John. Thank you, Lena. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Welly. We really, really, really appreciate this. This was a fun conversation. And Welly, I think that I love that you referred to their barn as the presidential palace. Like that's the best thing ever. So, thank you all. Thank you all for who have been watching. We hope that you enjoyed today's Turkey Talk. We will continue to respond to your Facebook and Twitter comments and questions that we didn't get to during this live session. We are grateful that you tuned in today. And if you enjoyed our cabinet conversations, please consider making a gift to support the mission and the work of Ford's Theater. You can do so at fords.org/donate. We hope that you all will join us in December for our next cabinet conversation. It's going to be another fun one. But until then, stay safe and well and have a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving. See you next time.